Hello, I'm Mary Scully, curator here at the Museum of Art, and also curator for Local Color, Judy Chicago in New Mexico, 1984 to 2014. It's my honor to welcome you here to St. Francis Auditorium tonight for the program, a conversation on collaboration with artists Judy Chicago and Donald Woodman, and curators Marianne Redding and myself. First, I have a few brief announcements. I would like to acknowledge the patience of those who arrived at 5 p.m. today due to the misprint in the Santa Fe Reporter. Thank you for sticking it out, and I hope we live up to your expectations. Secondly, I would like to remind everyone that we will have an opening reception Thursday, August 28th from 5 to 7 p.m., hosted by the Women's Board of the Museum of New Mexico. This reception is for a series of exhibitions, including Alcoves 1917 to 1927, guest curated by Malin Wilson Powell, and the second installment of our year-long series, Focus on Photography, curated by the New Mexico Museum of Art's own curator of photography, Catherine Ware. This next series includes a one-person exhibition, Delilah Montoya Syncretism, a group exhibition, Cameraless, featuring photographs made without benefit of a camera, and an updated photo lab installation centered around historic, alternative, and mixed media photography. Lastly, I would like to ask that you make sure the ringers are off on your cell phones, and we'll begin tonight's presentation. Is there something blocking this? There. The topic of tonight's conversation is collaboration. When I first began working with Judy on her exhibition, we began to discuss public programs, and it came as a surprise to me that no one had ever asked she and Donald to speak together about the work that they have made together. Therefore, it seemed only fitting, with Judy Chicago's exhibition, Local Color, installed here at the New Mexico Museum of Art, and Donald Woodman's exhibition, Transformed by New Mexico, installed at the New Mexico History Museum, that we take advantage of the opportunity and explore their decades-long collaboration in life as well as art. Our conversation this evening will circle around the topic of conversation. I will talk briefly about Judy's exhibition, Local Color, and Marianne Redding, curator of Donald Woodman's exhibition at the History Museum, will discuss Donald's work and exhibition. We will then, all four, participate in a dialogue about Donald and Judy's unique collaboration. Without question, Judy Chicago was brought to broad national and international attention for her most famous work, The Dinner Party, currently installed at the Elizabeth Sackler Center for Feminist Art at the Brooklyn Museum. Aside from all of its aesthetic, social, and political and historical significance, The Dinner Party was a large-scale collaboration. Ooh, how did that happen?
You want me to do it from here?
Let's go to the next one. Yeah, thanks. Involving more than 400 volunteers and more than 6 years in production. Our exhibition here at the Museum of Art focuses on work made later and opens at an interesting pivot point in Judy's career as an artist in relationship to collaboration. I think that maybe the water pitcher is blocking this. So let me...
I can do it from here.
Okay, great. If we can go to the image of the entry to the exhibition. Thank you so much. Chronologically, we begin the series with the series Power Play, made as an individual artist, painting and drawing in the studio. This large-scale project was the first that Judy began to work on while The Dinner Party was traveling and while another large-scale collaborative project, The Bird Project, was in production. Power Play is a series of works in a range of media and scale that investigate the social construct of gender, looking particularly at perceptions of masculinity and its association with power and violence. Next one. It was while working on this series that Judy met and ultimately married photographer Donald Woodman. This partnership in life has also become a prolific partnership in art. Local Color includes two projects that the artists produced together. Excellent.
All you have to do is say next.
Nuclear Wasted, which addresses the human and environmental consequences of the nuclear industry in New Mexico, was created while they were working on their largest scale collaboration, the Holocaust Project From Darkness into Light, a large-scale exhibition, audio guide, and publication. Both of these co-produced projects pair and layer Donald's evocative photographic imagery and technical proficiency with Judy's skill as a draft person and storyteller. The pairing of their diverse set of skills works for me in many ways, but most simply, the photographic images seem to ground the artwork we are looking at in fact, truth, and reality, while the painting and drawing and text expand on these truths, drawing us in, demanding that we think and feel deeper. For nearly 3 decades, Judy and Donald have lived and worked together, and they have continued to make work as individual artists. Tonight, we'll discuss, with prompting from Marianne and myself, how this collaboration works, maybe how it sometimes doesn't work, and how their work together impacts their individual studio practice. It is now my pleasure to introduce Marianne Redding, curator of Donald Woodman, Transformed by New Mexico. Marianne Redding is currently the chair of the photography department and curator of the Marion Center for Photographic Arts at Santa Fe University of Art and Design. And beginning September 1st, Marianne will assume the position of curator at the Turchin Center for the Visual Arts at Appalachian State University in Boone, North Carolina. It's my pleasure to welcome Marianne Redding and my sadness to bring you.
Thank you, Mary. And thank all of you for joining us tonight to celebrate the creative careers of Donald Woodman and Judy Chicago. Sometimes the collaboration between artists and curators is an intricate dance, and it's very often hard to tell who's actually leading that dance. I first met Donald Woodman in 2004 when I was working on an exhibition for the New Mexico State University Fine Art Gallery in Las Cruces. I was searching for artists because I was new to the state then for a regional exhibition, and someone referenced Donald Woodman. So I looked up his phone number, called him, and to my surprise, he answered the phone like on the second ring. And I explained who I was, what I was doing, and I asked if I could see him for a studio visit. He agreed. So in the days before the studio visit, I kept saying to myself, why do I know this man's name? Who is this next man? Why is he so familiar? And then I did a little bit more research on Donald, and I went, oh, yeah, he's married to Judy Chicago. Okay, well, don't let that intimidate you. You're going to look at his photographs. So that's what I did. I went. And actually, Donald wasn't included in that regional show. He actually was given a show of his own. Forgive the pun on Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own. And we have been collaborating on a series of exhibitions, projects, and events, which I hope we will continue to do in the future after my husband and I leave the Southwest for the Southeast at the end of this month. So Donald and our first collaboration was Photography in Transition, an exhibition and catalog that included Donald's work on the Rodeo in the West, the Holocaust Project, 15 Clouds, The Therapist, and Harbingers of Which Future, which opened at NMSU and traveled to several other venues. And our most recent project is the exhibition Transformed by New Mexico, which is now on view at the New Mexico History Museum. And that exhibition really celebrates Donald's gift to the Photo Legacy Project at the Photo Archives. That was started when I was the curator at the History Museum and is now in the capable hands of Daniel Kosharek, who is the new curator of photography at the History Museum. There's a very interesting book called Significant Others, Creativity and Intimate Partnership, that looks at famous partnerships in art and life, exploring the complexities of partnerships and collaborations, painful as well as enriching, through a shared creative context. One of the central questions raised by the book is this: if the dominant belief about art and literature is that they are produced by solitary individuals, but the dominant social structures are concerned with familiar and matrimonial structures, how do two creative people escape, or not, the constraints of this framework and construct an alternative story? So that is some of what we're going to explore tonight. And I think that part of being in a sexual and creative relationship is allowing your partner to have who are among other things, a necessary evil. Actually, they're part of the dance of bringing your creative work to an audience. And that's part of why Mary and I are here in this presentation for two exhibits in two separate but related museums, two artists who happen to be married and very often collaborate, but in this instance are working with two very different curators. So Donald has always collaborated. He discovered his potential as a creative photographer through studying with Minor White, who was in the 60s and 70s the leading voice for photography's personal expressive powers. Try saying that 6 times fast. White instilled in his students the idea that photography could be used for deep psychoanalytical investigations through its metaphoric capabilities, that photographs reveal not only their visual subject, but also the inner lives of their makers. Donald has continued this photographic exploration up through his work on The Therapist. This series visually investigates the artist's developing relationship with his therapist, Dr. Donald Feinberg, over 4 years in an extended portrait, to the extent that eventually the artist's wife, another artist, was brought into the sessions and into the photographs. Many people engage in a personal therapy over a lifetime, but not many have the courage to show the visual evidence of that process in photographs that transcend the personal and reach a universal level of interest. And in all relationships that deepen over time, Transformed by New Mexico provided a unique opportunity for myself, for this curator, to see into the past and read an artist's mind, in this case Donald. Usually this happens long after an artist has died, but luckily Donald is alive and well, and very much willing to dance. So in preparation for the exhibition at the History Museum and writing an essay for El Palacio, I spent several afternoons in Donald and Judy's art warehouse reading Donald's diaries from the 70s up to the early 80s when he met Judy and they began their intimate lifetime collaboration. And if you're interested, those diaries will eventually be given to the photo archives at the History Museum. I don't know how long Donald's going to restrict them, but they'll be there. Donald would leave me alone in the warehouse for hours that I spent reading, taking notes, and looking through boxes of negatives and Polaroids. There aren't any windows in the art warehouse, so I lost track of all time and the notion of past and present. I was immersed in the story of an artist that, like so many others, had left the East Coast for the Southwest. And what I want to do is read to you a brief quote from one of Donald's diaries. This is something that Donald wrote on June 11, 1972, after he had arrived here in New Mexico in the desert. He wrote, "Sunspot, New Mexico, is a slice right out of middle America's suburbia, and I fear that I may slip into the mainstream of society here, wherever that is. I will regress about 10 years. At times, I lapse into fears of copping out because I am working at an Air Force-owned and operated thing near our famed missile testing site at White Sands. This especially haunts me when I catch the news, which I try to avoid, and it shows the results of our bombing in Vietnam. Haven't I any moral commitment to anything, I ask myself? Of course, the things that have always plagued me are who I am and what I am and where I am going. And yes, what is the concept of work all about? Oh yes, the concept of time has been injected into my veins." So when I was reading this diary, suddenly Donald would appear. It would startle me out of nowhere, and I have to remember what year it was and reconcile the man who was standing in front of me with the man who was on the pages of the diaries that I had just been reading. Luckily, Donald never did become mainstream. He continued to wear his curly hair long. That was a long time ago. He got involved in anti-Vietnam efforts, was always questioning authority, something he still does today. He did and does still struggle with his personal doubts and fears as an artist. He hopped in and out of bed with all sorts of friends and colleagues and acquaintances during those years, and then he met Judy, which seems like an appropriate place to turn the microphone over to this conversation. Thank you very much.
So let's start by talking about how do you negotiate the intimate, personal, professional, and artistic relationship, because you're so close in all those arenas. Mine, it's not going? Okay, first of all, how do you negotiate your intimate, personal, and professional relationship with your artistic relationship? And then we can talk about some of the larger scale project, Holocaust project, and also move through some of these others as well. It's lots of artists work. Many artists work together who are couples, but I don't think on such projects with such long duration. The Holocaust project itself was 8 years.
You buy a large building, you create separate studios, and you come and go.
I can't hear you either.
Are your mics on?
Are you muted?
No?
I don't think so. I'm not.
Come on. Come on.
It's just a little.
1, 2, 3, testing. Whoa, whoa.
Bring your mic up closer.
No, I don't think that's what it is. Can you hear me? Lesson 1 on how collaboration works. I'm just kidding.
It was off.
Was off.
It's on now.
We can hear you now.
Okay, it's on now.
Okay, great.
All right.
Well, why don't we start over? And why don't we talk about, I know that when we look at power play in the particularly driving to the world to destruction, there's an area of that painting where the flames are painted, where you talk about you always seem to talk about when you were dating Donald and talking to him about the flames and the intensity of the flames. And while it was your individual work, it seemed as though you were already beginning an artistic dialogue.
Actually, I think it's important to understand that Donald and I met, we met 7 times, and I didn't notice, which was like a fucking line. Anyway, but I just wasn't looking. We finally met and started dating. We kind of ignited it as Zobra. 29 years ago. And at that time, I had already out of power play, and my understanding that I was brought up in a secular Jewish household, and my father was descended from 28 generations of rabbis and broke away. In fact, he broke away so much that when my mother and he were dating, and they went to his mother's house for dinner on Friday night every week. She kept kosher. And after one such meal, my mother asked him if he wanted her to learn how to cook Jewish food. And he said, no, I'm allergic to Jewish cooking. As a result, I just knew nothing about my heritage, although I knew that in some ways it had shaped who I was. All I knew was what my father said was that I had blue blood because we were descended from a very famous 17th century rabbi. At any rate, I had gotten interested in the subject of the Holocaust right before I met Donald. And it was September of 1985, and Shoah, the Cloud Lanzmann film, was about to premiere in New York. And Donald's working on this book about his relationship when he was with Agnes Martin. He was her assistant for 7 years, and he talks in the book about how impulsive he was, how he impulsively made decisions. Well, we were a perfect match, because I had decided I was going to go see Shoah, and when Donald and I got together, I told him of my interest and asked him if he wanted to go too. So that's how, when we went there, we were just completely transfixed and blown away by that film. For both of us, it was like a revelation. And for me, who had been identified primarily as a woman and working in the women's community, it was the first time in my life that I felt bonded to somebody not by gender, but by cultural heritage. Although
film is 9 hours long. It's shown in 2 4.5-hour segments. And sitting in the dark in a movie theater, experiencing this for the first time together, created a kind of bond that was unique.
So it wasn't like, we had prior plans. We just walked out of that theater, and I don't even remember when we decided we were going to learn more together. We were going to start on.
Well, you already started working on the subject when we met.
I was just starting to think about it.
And then you said to, actually at that time I was in partnership in a construction company. It was sort of the New Mexico artist fallacy that he's going to start a construction company that would support you so you could do your art. That wasn't working. But Judy said to me, do you want to work on the project with me? And I said yes. And that meant that I had to quit this idea of starting a construction company, which I did, and we went to work.
And be a photographer
Be a
full
photographer,
time.
well,
What a terrible idea.
so there wasn't a hard choice to make, but it was an impulsive choice, because I've been working at this. I was in partnership with an architect friend in Santa Fe, Richard Yates, and we had a company that did rammed earth structures, and I had been involved in writing the earth building codes for the state. So I have an undergraduate degree in architecture, so it wasn't so far-fetched. It was much better choosing to be a photographer.
But could we have the next image? But then, back, no, forward. Yeah. So 3 months after our first date, we got married. It was not something that I would recommend as a life choice, but for us it worked. I mean, I'm not sure how many other people would get married, would meet, fall in love, get married, and start working on a project all at once together, but we did. But then we had a little segue, a surprising segue. 3 weeks after we got married, we were living, by then, I was living, and then Donald came and moved in a house on Canyon Road that had been rented to me by the woman who ran Through the Flower, my nonprofit, my small nonprofit, and who was the administrator of the Birth Project, which was still going on in California. And of course, I always thought I was going to move back to California. I mean, I never really dreamed I was going to end up in New Mexico. My stuff was in California for a very long time.
For another 5 years.
Yeah, but as I said to Charlotte Jackson on the phone yesterday, I tried to get Donald to move to California, but once he got on the freeway in Los Angeles, that was the end. He can't drive 90 miles an hour on the freeway. He has an anxiety attack. So anyway, I was running on Upper Canyon Road. It was a Sunday, and I got hit by a pickup truck while I was running. Now, that was the bad news. The good news was that it eventually got us into the Berlin Hotel, which I'm going to just do a short segue, okay, and tell that story. I'm lying there on the road, and this guy hit me and kept going, but this couple stopped in a car, and they got out, and the woman came over to me. I had no idea how badly I was hurt. It just hurt like hell. And I don't know, I thought maybe he ruptured my spleen. It wasn't even the same side. But anyway, I'm lying there on the road, and this woman gets out and comes over to me, and she says, "Can you tell me your name?" So I told her my name, and she said, "You're a famous artist." And I'm like, "Fuck famous artist!" All the ambulance while her husband went down and knocked on the door of our house and said to Donald, "Are you married to Judy Chicago?" "Yes." "Well, she's in emergency." So, at any rate, as it turned out, was worth saving because it was a historical property and it was on the register. And he asked me to call the head of the State Preservation Department here in Santa Fe, in New Mexico. And the reason he wanted me to call was because it was he and his wife who picked me up on the road, and his wife was Fran Levine. And it was Tom Merlin, and he eventually helped us to get the financing for the hotel. So this story has a happy ending, but when I got hit by a pickup truck, it wasn't happy. And
What upset you the most was the headline in the New Mexican said, Judy was 46. It said, 50-year-old artist.
anyway, Donald and I, this was the first, although we were slowly doing research on the Holocaust Project, the first actual body of art we did was a series of images combining drawing and photography called My Accident. It was 21 drawings. Mary showed some of them in the governor's gallery when she was running. And it was our first effort to merge like drawing, painting, and photography.
And what are you doing with this particular body of work?
Oh, we recreated the accident. Donald documented it.
Yeah, it was sort of it was sort of the beginning of what was the basic concept for the Holocaust Project. The photographs told the story and with facts, and then Judy told some history or embellished it. In the Holocaust Project, you go to the exhibition here, it kind of works like history painting and documentary photography. The photography sets the idea in a real place, in a real time, in a sense of reality, and then the painting tells more of the stories that we heard or embellishes the history that we had learned about the Holocaust. So we didn't know it, but that's where we started out with this series.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't consciously think, oh, we're going to, this is what we're going to do when we work on the Holocaust Project. It was just, this is what we did to try and, as a couple, deal with this kind of surprising and traumatic event. I mean, the action drawings tell a story. It was also our first effort to deal with really difficult subject matter because, and I hadn't actually thought about that until we started this, because, I mean, not only was the fact that I was hit by a pickup truck and was in intensive care and lost half my body blood from internal bleeding, but half my body was covered with hematomas. So now here I am. I look like hell, right? I'm a newlywed. And, Donald and I dealt with it by his actually taking pictures of my bruised and battered body and our trying to transform this experience and this subject matter into art. And now I see, as I think about it, because I never thought about it before, because we've never talked about this before. Like Mary said, nobody's ever invited us to talk about our process before. But I see that in so many ways, the accident drawings set the stage for beginning to approach difficult subject matter. I mean, it was much simpler than anything we came up with in the Holocaust Project, right? It was just your picture and my drawings.
It was pretty direct.
And then sometimes I would draw right on the pictures or paint on the pictures.
No, it was pretty direct. I think
I wanted to make a little observation about the Holocaust Project, Nuclear Wasted, and the accident drawings. So the accident drawings is that 18 or 21 pieces of the portfolio that tell this story, part of it recreation, part of it documentation. But you see that the photographs are still very much contained within a square format, a very photographic format. When you go into Nuclear Wasted Project, you begin working with the photo linen, and there's still a sense of photograph and overlay. And when you get to the Holocaust Project, there's so many stages of photographing, working on top of re-photographing, that they really mesh. There's, so you still have this kind of narrative of truth from the photograph, the broader narrative from the painting and text, but they're really merged, and there's a really interesting progression to that. And I had noticed that with Nuclear Wasted and the Holocaust Project, the more I walk people through, but I hadn't myself either made the connection to this series.
Even the choice of material in the Holocaust Project and Nuclear Wasted, it's a photo linen that allowed high resolution photo printing and also allowed oil painting on it. And ironically enough, it was made in Germany, and now it's not produced at all. It would be completely impossible for us to make those images now because the strata doesn't exist anymore. So, I mean, unlike paper, which would never have allowed that fusion, I mean, we tried it with Polaroid transfer and remember.
And then we did paint on emulsions with coast-to-coast
Cancer, right.
Well, we experiment nowadays with digital printing, and there's a whole different set of technology available. But part of the challenge of combining the two, I mean, we can talk about that when we get into collaborating on
Well, no, yeah, let's go to the next image because one of the other questions, no, that one.
Yeah.
One of the other questions, part of the question that Mary posed had to do with more than our artistic collaboration, and Marianne referenced that too. Partners in life and in art, and after 2 years of research and preparation for the making images about the subject of the Holocaust, we made this 2.5-month trip through the landscape of the Holocaust, and it really challenged our young marriage, don't you think?
Yeah, well, it challenged our marriage, but it was a new experience for me. And I don't know. I've worked with a lot of artists. There are not a lot of artists that do the amount of research that Judy gets involved in the subject matter. And it's not just research in one area. I was exposed to research across a broad area of ideas and information. And I had the easy part because Judy would do this research and then she would hand feed me. She said, you need to read this book, you need to read that article, you need to do this kind of thing. So I sort of got the cliff notes on what had to be done. But then as Judy said, we immersed ourselves in 2.5 months of travel, and this was the itinerary of our trip in 1987 through, as Judy dubbed it, the landscape of the Holocaust. We visited concentration camps, massacre sites, archives, all kinds of things. And I'm going to go to the next image, but this is on the trip. The trip was designed to do both research and to begin to create a photo base for eventually to be used in the creation of the images for the Holocaust Project, which we had no idea of what we were going to do.
And and then on the trip you did a lot of the heavy lifting. I was exposed to how many suitcases a photographer carries with him. It's a good thing you're so tall and strong. Oh my God. I mean, I was looking at all that. We bought a car and drove around, and everywhere we went, it rained for 2.5 months. So it was always gray. It was always, oh my God. And I mean, the stress of it was incredible, and there were times we got into, we really had it was terrible.
You have to understand that the first image on the upper left, is at the entrance way to the camp at Auschwitz, the famous sign, work makes you free, Hab macht frei. The second photograph was something we didn't expect to get, and this is at Birkenau, which is the sister camp to Auschwitz. It is a swampy area where the ashes from the crematorium were dumped.
Because actually Auschwitz is 3 camps. It's Auschwitz, which was the concentration camp, Buno, which was the slave labor camp, and Birkenau, which was the extermination camp. And it was there, and that's what the pit is, was on one of the crematoria. I mean, the first camp we went to in Knoxweiler in the Alsace-Lorraine area, I mean, there was still ashes in the oven. Not like Dachau, if any of you have ever been to Dachau, which is really cleaned up. It's like the Disneyland of concentration camps. But we walked down the passage to death that thousands of Jews made in Vilna, where my great-grandparents came from. And, I mean, it was so difficult when we would fight. We didn't know if we were fighting because of the stress of the trip and the information we were discovering, or was it in a personal fight? Or, I mean, it was really hard to separate out what was personal, what was artistic, what was intellectual, what was just sheer emotional overload. At the same time, you know, what we learned bonded us. Don't you think that's true?
Yeah, well, the whole process was there was a lot of, there was a lot of sharing, and I think one of the strengths that Judy had, and maybe this is coming up through the women's community, was having the patience to deal with working through very strong emotional content.
Oh yeah, that was the whole nature of the women's community. It was like so much process. It was like, enough already. Let's get to the product. When people would say to me after the dinner party, oh, the process was more important than the product. I'm like, you must be kidding. The only reason I went through all that process was to get to the product.
Well, we did get to the product very quickly.
No, we didn't.
It took
2 years. We didn't
2
make
years
the
after.
first image until 2 years after we started researching.
Yeah, so then we were back here, working in the studio. But we were working. We had our own studios, so there were times we were working alone on material that would come together, and then there were times we would come together and work together. This is in the bottom photo is in Judy's studio. We're working on 4 Questions, which is in the show here.
Which was the most complex of the images. We had to basically invent the technique for the content of each image. And by the time we were getting towards the last couple of years of the project, we had already developed a certain expertise with a way of approaching images like in See No Evil, Hear No Evil, or Banal Medieval Then and Now. You know, we sort of had it down about how to merge painting and photography, but then it was like, you know what, Donald, we really need to do something different for this image and the subject matter is so complex. And Donald has a huge reservoir of technical prowess as a photographer. I mean, huge. And one of the reasons, like Donald often says, you know, that he really, like, you know, the way things worked and the reason we got married so fast, and he insisted on our getting married, and, you know, he wouldn't put up with anything, blah, 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 was because it was bravado. And I'm like, yeah, bravado got you into the door, so to speak. But you know, if you couldn't produce, you know, it would have lasted a nanosecond. I mean, it's that Donald is so immensely talented. And in the Holocaust, it's like when he came up with the idea for how to tackle 4 questions, which we later used to refer to as an agam with content. If any of you know the Jewish artists who did those abstract 2-sided pieces. But anyway, remember when you folded that?
Right, no, we still have the... I said to Judy, oh, do you remember that piece of art that's in the hallway at the Museum of Modern Art that has this folded corrugated surface? That was the concept, and then I had to make a model. One of the things Judy says I have a lot of talent to do things. One of the things that our collaboration has done, and Judy's fame, is that it gave me a vehicle in which to apply all of this talent that I have. You can have a lot of talent. If you have nothing to apply it to, or no avenue in which to express it, you can go to waste very quickly.
Well, that wasn't going to happen with me.
No.
No way. I think one of the things that people ask all the time, apart from a lot of the interpersonal stress of the Holocaust project, Donald and I think we've been able to collaborate pretty easily, don't you think?
Yes.
Well, maybe collaborating on that project might have been what made it possible to get through something so arduous in terms of content and in terms of physical and financial work.
I could never have done it by myself. There's no way I could have done it by myself.
It's interesting that you had to go through your own violent, traumatic experience as a couple in your personal relationship to then be able to go and do this kind of work as you collaborate.
Yeah, but we didn't see it that way then.
No one does then, but now when you look back at it.
The other thing is that Donald and I have skills in very different areas. Really, literally. Donald is technically really incredibly gifted. And when I was 13, I took the MMPI multi-phase personality test or something like that, and I got 99 percentile on everything but spatial relations. I got 0. So it's like they're like, how is this possible? Well, it's like I have a hole in my head where it comes to spatial relations and knowledge. So we just have very different areas of skill. Ava Borns often says about her and Edward that they share one brain. I don't say it like that. I say Donald and I together make a perfect person. I don't mean perfect in as a human being. I mean perfect in terms of abilities.
We can do a lot of things, and also I think the Holocaust project the subject matter doesn't lend itself to very large groups of collaborators.
Oh, no.
The intensity of the subject matter, the complexity of the putting the images together. We brought in people to do specific aspects.
Mike Weaver, the guy who did work on stained glass. Well, Perkins worked on one of the stained glass pieces. He was a Santa Fe glass artist. But it took everything Donald and I had, intellectually, emotionally, financially, aesthetically, to deal with this project. It was the most daunting project of my career, and we couldn't ask other people to go down this road.
Right. One of the things that I said in the introduction, which isn't really a content of the exhibition, but I think marks the beginning time period of what we show in Local Color, is you had said to me once that the Birth Project was going on, and you are nothing if not prolific, and it was you needed to see things coming to realization. You needed product, and it was you needed to be finishing things and seeing progress. So I think it really, to me, feels like, when I look at it this way, a pivot point. You're working on your own. You're working with somebody who you have a really intimate relationship with, physically, but also intellectually and emotionally and artistically. And then even the later projects, A Stitch in Time, it was a very selected group of people and a very intimate collaboration, even in that regard. So I think that was something that wasn't intended in our exhibition, but I think because by virtue of you moving here to have time to work on your own, it began that kind of pivot in how you worked in collaboration.
So Donald and I have gone back and forth from individual work to collaborative work. It's sort of seamless. It's like our life and our work are seamless. Our days are seamless between personal conversations, individual time, overlap, decision making. It's just seamless.
This is a good example of how it is. Judy wanted to do this project about our cats. Well, she decided to do all these watercolors. So there's a lot of individual work, but then the issue became to turn it into a book. And I I make no distinction between, I know coming up as a young photographer, oh, this is my creative work and this is my commercial work. I make very little distinction between it. And in this case, taking Judy's watercolors and turning it into a book. Judy had a lot of experience doing books, but you need to get photographs of the artwork. They nowadays need to be turned into digital media, and so it's something I have skill at and have done in a number of books we've done together.
Well, you developed a skill. You became an expert on preparing digital files for printing, you know.
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah. Right now, it's the whole, you know, over our period together, the whole thing has changed. I mean, from going back to the dinner, when Judy and I got married, the dinner party had never really been totally photographed. So I started I don't know how many year campaign because you had to wait every time it was set up, and every time it was set up, it was in a different situation. So
You want to tell a story about how you had to wait to marry me and be able to install the dinner party?
I can
That's
tell.
a funny story.
I was in Houston in 1980 in graduate school in photography, and the dinner party opened at San Francisco Museum of Art in 1979, and was supposed to go on tour, and then the tour was canceled, and there was a woman in Houston, Mary Ross Taylor, who owned a feminist bookstore, which was sort of the center of the art scene in Houston.
She owned the house we lived in.
She lived on the house. The art world's very small. So I was involved with a group of artists in Houston in starting an alternative art space called the Mondale Annex, and a group of women came to an art and law class which I was taking and showed this book about the dinner party and announced they wanted to bring the dinner party to Houston. It was the first alternative showing. So because I was involved in alternative art spaces, I said, well, we'll help try to find a place because it takes a very special installation. They need an installation crew and everything like that. So I started to get involved in it, and then all of a sudden the women's community in Houston announced that the dinner party was a women's project and men were not involved. So I boycotted Judy's lecture, I boycotted the dinner party installation, I did boycott the show itself, and then 5 years later, when Judy and I got married, I took over, writing the installation manual, overseeing the installation tour, and the continued tour of the dinner party,
And photographing.
photographing it, because it wasn't a woman's.
So, well, I just want to say one final thing about Kitty City, which is parts of it, a small fraction of it, is up in our exhibition. What I quite liked about it, in addition to illustrating an aspect of Judy's life, is it's a 24 hours in the day of your cats, but it's 24 hours in the day of Judy and Donald, too.
Right.
So I thought it was a really nice thing to include in the exhibition, and really kind of cemented this presentation of your life in New Mexico here.
The only problem for us, if you see, has everybody seen the show? Well, you know all the kitty sculptures? You know, normally they live in our hallway. Don put up special shelves for them, and, you know, it's like they're all the cats who lived with us in the Berlin Hotel, and not having them there, I mean, of course, this is where we always, you know, like, go on the side of art rather than our personal life. It's a perfect example of how we always make sacrifices personally for our art. And so our cats are here, not there. Eventually they'll all come here, so they'll all be together, but not yet.
Well, we appreciate it, and I have to say, they were an eccentric addition, and they've been really quite popular. So let's go to our last collaboration of the evening, which would be to invite a few questions from the audience. If anybody has any questions or comments they'd like to make, or if anybody here has anything additional that they'd like to add.
One thing I would like to add is listening to you both talk tonight, there's an interesting, you have such respect for each other, you have such love for each other, you still poke at each other, you still date, but you have, after 30 years, you have this relationship that is really a model, I think, for artists or for anyone, because it's all of those things that make you successful together.
Right. We had a series of pretty basic questions, like how does it affect your studio practice? And we got something much more profound, I think, just from your internal conversation. So, question? So the question is, essentially, so you took the 2.5-month tour, collected all this information and images and ideas for the project. Did you know at that time what it was going to look like? Or did you take that back and then figure out how what things would be used? Is that?
You know, when Local Color opened, I was really nervous about it because for a long time the dinner party blocked out most of the rest of my career, and that started to change in 2011 with Pacific Standard Time, when people started to see my early work, and then there was a rush of shows around my early work, and people started being familiar with it. But this was work that nobody knew, and I'm going somewhere with this.
I believe you.
So, I mean, there were 1,200 people at the public opening, and, I was really nervous. People were going to say, oh, her early work was better, but that's not what happened at all. And seeing the work that I've done in New Mexico together for the first time made me realize that Donald had built us this place in Berlin, which I don't really like Berlin, but this place is just incredible, that it afforded me a home to pursue my own vision as an artist, which is very different from the prevailing mainstream. I don't make products. I start down a path because I'm interested in something, and I go where that path takes me. And for me, art is about discovery. And so, for the first 2 years of our work on the Holocaust project, Donald and I were doing research. Donald was spending a lot of time in the photo archives, and we were looking at exhibitions around the country of how the Holocaust was presented. And of course, one of the things that was really striking, this was the middle of the 80s, and you could walk into most major contemporary art museums and not even know the Holocaust existed or it ever happened. And I was interested in that absence because that's something I've always been interested in. Anyway, at that point, when we went on our trip, we were thinking that we would make a project that pretty much followed the way the Holocaust is presented in America, which is through the Jewish experience and through a series of a particular narrative. Well, the trip completely upended our plans because we discovered that the Holocaust was much bigger and had impacted so many more millions of people than we had ever dreamed. We knew nothing about the slave labor aspect of the Holocaust when we walked into the tunnels of Ebensee in the Austrian Alps, where prisoners dug the tunnels with their bare hands and worked in there until they died, which was usually 3 months. We knew nothing about it. And we were stunned to discover that in every country we visited, the Holocaust was presented from an entirely different point of view. In some places, the Jewish experience was simply eradicated. So no, when we came back, we had to start all over again. And we had to start thinking about how we could expand our concept to reflect what we were beginning to understand. Just beginning. The reason it took so long was because it took so long understand the subject we had gotten ourselves into so impulsively.
Well, for me, it was also a very frightening situation because this is back in the days of film. I'm shooting film, shooting black and white and color. I had brought Polaroid with me. We used that. We would draw on the Polaroids. We would discuss some of the ideas. But it was probably good that I came up early on in my career in commercial photography in New York as an architectural photographer because I was shooting for 2.5 months without seeing anything. We couldn't process along the way everything was packed away and brought home. The issue of, did I shoot enough? Did I shoot what we're going to need later? There are all those, on top of all the stuff we're discovering, there are all these other pressures that professional photographers endure when going on assignment. We as a consuming public only get to see the slick photos in the magazine at the end, but there's all that other stuff that's going on, and
And I was doing sketchbooks and journals and drawing books,
you saw Judy, a lot of places I was, and then there's like.
Oh, let's go back to that slide. Actually,
There.
no, the next one. It's the next one. The one on the right. Remember, I mentioned the Vilna Gaon, my ancestor. Well, this is in Vilna, and that's his tomb. And I was inside the tomb of my ancestor. The middle one is Prague, the Prague cemetery, and the one on the left is Treblinka. Each of those stones represents a town, or village, or shtetl that was destroyed. Estelle, hi.
Hi, Judy. I met up with you during the birth project. So I want to go from death to birth, and we all realize this is your 75th birthday, and we should be celebrating that. Is it okay if we sing happy birthday?
Oh my God! Estelle, I really appreciated my birthday finally came and went. Because I had so much birthday celebration all year, and then finally a private small party at our friend's house, Janet Russick and David Scheinbaum, on my actual birthday, and I was like, okay, that's enough birthday. But in April, I had the opportunity to do this major fireworks piece that I had waited 40 years to do in terms of scale and cost and complexity in Prospect Park in Brooklyn in conjunction with my show at the Elizabeth Sackler Center for Feminist Art, the first part of my career, which is the companion show to this show. And there were 12,000 people there, and at the end of the piece, they all sang me.
So have you re-seen or have you rethought your experience of seeing Shoah?
Well, let's see, Shoah was how many years ago? 30 years ago. We've seen a lot of material about the Holocaust. We've sat through survivor video testimony at Yale and UCLA long before the Shoah Project by Spielberg was started when they were documenting a lot of survivor testimony. Judy's done an enormous amount of reading on the subject matter. Thinking and looking and representation of the Holocaust has changed enormously in the last 30 years. And actually, it's not being immodest, but it's come around to where we took it 30 years ago in terms of representing the Holocaust in visual images. And I can't tell you how many times people came to us and said, you can't represent the Holocaust in art, it's a taboo, things like that, to try to, put barriers up against this. For me, I have to think on TV, they did these black and white shows about the Second World War, and there were photos of liberating the concentration camps and piles of bodies, and being interested in photo history, I've seen a lot of photographs of photographers who went into the camps right during liberation. Judy said, I can't tell you how many days I've spent in the National Archives looking at images from the liberation of the camps, historical material that was found in the camps. The thing about Shoah was it's the first piece about the Holocaust that I saw that didn't have any of that kind of imagery. It just was strictly interview, and I think what was sort of overwhelming and informative was there were people telling stories. It was our first experience about that. And I think it has to be looked at in that context. You can't fast forward it to what we know. You can't fast forward it to, the criticism can't be leveled 30 years later with the Holocaust Museum and all the hundreds of museums around the world that are telling the story of the Holocaust. So I can tell you it's my first experience of seeing that film at that time.
And for us it was transformative, but it was just the beginning for us. It was not the ending. It was not that was it. That was the document of the Holocaust. It was the beginning for us. And I'll tell you one thing that all the Holocaust museums and all the Holocaust documentation around the world omits, which is women's experience. That was common to Shoah. It was common to every Holocaust institution in the world. And it was something Donald and I wanted to rectify. And so we did a gender equal project in which we tried to represent the experiences of both women and men. And it was very interesting that people are so unused to seeing women's experiences as part of human history that when this project was shown, people would say, oh, it's a women's project, even though there were just as many images of men as there were of women.
So I want to make a quick comment, and it's not directly related to Shoah, and I don't want to speak for you, but you had a question about notions of re-victimization, and one of the biggest aspects, or the culminating aspect of the Holocaust Project is from darkness into light, and kind of can we learn from past mistakes, and this was human on human, and so there's kind of an optimistic, empowering component at the resolution of that.
Well, it's a vision.
It's a vision. I'm not saying it's fixed,
vision.
but I think that's a very important aspect to the project.
Mary's talking about the final image in the Holocaust Project, which is called Rainbow Shabbat. It's a big stained glass installation, which was actually the first time, and the logo, the introductory image is here, the first time I ever worked in glass, which is what I've been doing since then.
Right. And unfortunately, we didn't really get much chance to cover that. We had a lot to talk about today. I want to thank you guys. I really appreciate your candor and directness. And I want to thank Mary Ann so much for contributing to the conversation and telling us about Donald's show at the History Museum. If you've not seen either exhibition, please do. I also want to thank you